Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rabbit Trail Podcast. This is the Happy New Year
Happy
edition.
New Year, everyone.
We weren't really sure we were going to do this, but hey, we're all together on the new year. 2025 is here. We're excited, and yes, it's an episode.
It is.
How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Yeah, room's spinning a little bit, but I'm doing good.
Ooh,
All right.
fun. Roller coaster episode for Steven. Yes. So we've just gotten back. It's been Christmas, New Year's, been lots of things rolling, and maybe you're joining us for the first time. Well, this is a little different one, but we're glad you're joining us on this Rabbit Trail podcast where we're going to chase the truth wherever it runs. Normally, we would go back to the sermon that was preached the Sunday before, ask some questions, dig in a little deeper, have some interactions whatever we can. But this week is a little different. What we're going to do is we're actually going to invite you guys to kind of listen in and be a part of at some level. We tried to invite people to be a part of it.
We did.
For a year in review. But anyway, we're just glad you're joining with us. If this is your first time, stick with us. This gets better. But there's a lot of other things going on. My fellow rabbit tracers, you guys ready to take on those trails?
Yes,
Let's
we
do
are.
this.
My name is Stephen Oldham, a local outreach pastor here at Olive Branch. We'd like to know where you're listening. I don't know if things are moving. And so if you are listening to us on Spotify or if you're listening to us on iTunes, let us know. But also, if you're watching along on YouTube, which some of you are, give us a thumbs up, a like, but more importantly, share the things you like with other people. Let people know that you're enjoying the podcast. And if you have a real formative question, you could send it to
Rabbit Trail at obcc.church.
Rabbit Trail at obcc.church. That's with two T's, right?
Yes, it is. Well, rabbit with one and then trail with one, but it's all one word,
not
so
Rabbi
it's two
Trail?
T's.
No,
So,
not Rabbi Trail.
Yeah.
That's a
Rabbi
whole
Trail.
other podcast.
yes. And there are
which is a
different
good pun
answers.
for a rabbi out there.
Yeah.
Just wants to start his own rabbi trail.
So my name is Brent Branchard. I'm the Connections pastor here at Olive Branch Church. And we are just going to kind of go a loosey-goosey year in review, just kind of talk about some of what our favorite sermons were, some of what our favorite podcast episodes were, and just kind of have a good time. So we just are coming off the new year, and we want to celebrate.
To celebrate, Jesus celebrate.
Oh, they were going
see,
for a different
went,
song.
you went that way. You went
That's
Christian.
really
I was
old. I
thinking,
went way back.
Celebrate good times. Come on. Doom, 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 doom. All right. So let's just start off with just, how was your Christmases?
Christmas-I? Was that a thing? Christmas Eve?
Christmases?
Christmases? Even though they're all the same one?
Yes.
Christmas was good. Yeah, it was fun. My kids had a good time, and I got myself a smoker. I mean, smoking's bad, I know, but he sits in my house and just smokes cigarettes all day long. I still got to learn how to
But
use it.
now we just need to buy ashtrays.
Greg and his terrible jokes.
We call him Uncle George. He just sits there and smokes.
I'm going to name my smoker Uncle George. That's a great idea. This is
go.
my smoker, Uncle George. I used to say, when we got married, we got a dishwasher. My hands are really, really dry. But
So now you have so many different cooking utensils at your house. You got cast iron things that you make your Friday night pizzas in. Mm-hmm. You got your little put your meat in the bag and boil it thing.
Oh, the sous vide? Yeah.
Sous vide. You got a grill. You got is your barbecue
smoker.
Is your barbecue a charcoal?
No.
It's a
gas.
butane. And now you got a smoker.
Because the smoker has the pellets, though, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you could put like cheeses and things in there, or meats. And does it smoke
Can I
meat?
smoke cheese?
You can. I know. You can ask Andy. how to do
Sometimes
that.
it's Gouda.
He smoked a cheddar cheese one time, and it was amazing.
Ooh.
I don't know how he did it. I don't know how
Look
you
into
do it.
that. That's a great idea.
Huh?
But smoked
that
bacon is the thing.
Huh?
You can smoke some.
Smoked bacon.
Yeah, he did that too, and I was like, I don't know how he did that, but man, that's the best bacon I've ever had.
Anything happening?
Well,
your holidays?
everybody was sick, so there was a lot of coughing and passing around Robitussin. But we did
Speaking
open
of that.
we did open presents. I didn't get sick, but I got vertigo So
Yeah.
the room's still spinning to this day. I don't know why. So, so if I go like this, you'll know
Is it disco vertigo?
I wish.
When you said the room was rocking, I was going to announce that you had vertigo, but I couldn't get that word in my head, and I kept thinking impetigo, and I know that's not what you have.
I don't even know what that is.
What is that?
heck?
Sounds like a very obscure Mexican dish.
Impetigo? No, I think it's either a skin thing or
there's
a
vertigo.
swelling of your joints thing. I don't know, one of those.
Infantile.
I'm hoping it's not something so horrible that we're gonna.
Yeah,
have to
don't
give
type
this
that
an
in. You're like, that's what it is.
It's a contagious skin infection caused by bacteria that results in red
I
itchy
didn't get
sores that eventually burst and crust over.
There you go.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
It's like
Thank you, Brent,
that's
for
not-
introducing us to something
Yeah.
even more disgusting.
Yeah.
I didn't search for that.
See, you guys thought I was making
this
up
is
another
like going
word.
back to the eating scab comments.
This is worse than
there you
eating
go.
scabs.
I mean,
by the way.
well, we're on a review.
Yeah.
We are officially
Was that
reviewing.
this year?
Oh, no,
I
I
can't
think that was
remember.
last year.
Was it last
near
year?
Christmas
I
time.
don't
So
know.
I took us way back, 2022.
Okay, in the last 2 years, that was probably my favorite topic.
that.
All right, so I just wanted to mention my Christmas. Number one, you guys, I've talked about it on the show. You guys know me. I complain about it all the time. Is I am a horrible gift giver. Horrible. But Nancy was taking a nap on Christmas Eve before the festivities. And so after she woke up, she told me, she said that she had dreamed that I gave her a diamond ring for Christmas. And I was so excited. And I thought, finally, I got her the perfect gift. So I went out from under the tree and I gave her that small package, and she opened it up because she was like wondering, what does this mean? What does this mean that I dreamed you were giving me a diamond ring? And I was like, wow, So I went and got the gift. I handed it to her. I said, this is perfect. And she opened it up, and it was a book, The Meaning of Dreams. So, yeah. So I was able to really connect with her there in what she
appreciated it.
Yeah.
How small of a
kinda
book is this?
She kind of looked a little disappointed at first, but she'll get over that. So I'm also going to give her a book on resolving conflict now. So,
Yeah. How to love your husband when he's unlovable.
yes. So
Was
anyway,
that a Brent and Terrible joke?
that kind of
Oh,
was,
okay.
yeah. And I kind of butchered it a little
Not a
bit.
true
but
story.
Not a true story.
Not a
No,
true story.
not a true story.
What did Nancy get you?
Oh, she got me a pair of shoes. She got me 3 T-shirts. I don't know if people know me, but I like T-shirts. And she got me, I don't know.
Yeah.
I am sure there's something else because she buys a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Stephen, what was your favorite thing?
Books. I got books. Those are my favorite things.
Book 'em, Dano.
I'm trying to remember. The room's still spinning. The thing I
gumdrops
remember
on
most
roses,
about
no.
Christmas is that we were like all tired and sick, so we just barbecued all day long. So in the morning, when I got there, was just tons of meat, and that was my favorite thing about the holiday. I was like, oh, because it was like Portuguese sausage and like all kinds of like steak and chicken, and I was like, yeah, I like this as much as more than the ham.
Wow.
So
It was a bit of everything.
So now we're going to move past these terrible jokes and Christmas experience. I know they're good Christmas experiences. So just curious, like, okay, we got Stephen can jump out on the internet and do his little deal here, like Stephen's first impressions. Apparently, we finally are back and we've got some comments.
We took 2 weeks off, and I think that was too long.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, might take a while to get through.
Oh, you don't have to do all of them.
Yeah, no, there's a couple. One was way back, like 2 weeks ago. Someone just said they don't believe Jesus has biological siblings. I don't know if we addressed that on the last podcast, but like that's a Catholic thing.
It's a very common Catholic thought, yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have to believe that if you have certain dogmatic choices that are made for you. But that's not one of us for Protestants. We don't.
Yeah,
we
covered
have the flexibility to
I will
do that.
say this though.
covered that
I mean,
many
like
times.
I never really studied Catholicism's theology that well. I know certain things, like they believe that Mary was a perpetual virgin, but I kind of almost took that as she was re-virginized, not she abstained from sex her whole life. That's kind of what
That's what it's the other one. It's the second one.
It's the
That's
second
what
Yeah,
it
no,
is.
I know
otter one.
now it's the second one, but when I'd first heard that, that's what I thought, because I knew that he had brothers. So I was just kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
well, then maybe God made her a virgin again, and a virgin, because that was purity, a sign of purity.
Perpetual
And-
virginity means that Jesus was born of a virgin. She was a virgin both before, during, and after. So that rules out anything of her lineage
Right.
being any of the siblings of Jesus, and that makes it a little harder when you start looking at the text, but also when you start looking at some of the evidence involved. It also means that Joseph had to be the one that was related to all, and that's why they're half siblings. But then that would make them not really half siblings, so that's kind of odd.
In fact, they're not related to Joseph. That's
Because they'd be related to Joseph.
it.
Yeah.
They're step siblings at that point.
So they're usually like, sometimes they're from another marriage, a previous relationship prior to, like he was married and maybe his wife died, and Joseph remarried and was married to which did happen at the time. But that's a bit of a stretch.
Well, and it's actually one of those weird in the history of Joseph, a strange, actually have it up here, and it's an New Testament apocryphal book that would have been written in, gosh, let me pull this information up, because it's kind of an odd, one of those odd books, but this is, one of those old ancient books that probably was written in the 300-400s fan fiction stuff, and it's in this one where they say, oh yeah, he had a wife, and she died, and then he was this old dude, and Mary is being held in. You see, in the stories, Mary is so pure and so perfect. She is born of an immaculate conception. She doesn't even have.
And then you have an infinite regress problem.
Yeah, and so she was birthed and then she was raised in the temple. Like she lives in the temple which by the way, that didn't happen in the temples. That's a pagan thing. That's not a Jewish thing. You didn't raise children in the temples.
Unless you were a part of the lineage. You're talking about Samuel. But
No,
it didn't
even
happen
then-
I don't know if it happened to women in particular either.
Yeah, and so even then, I don't quite know. Like they were literally, she never left the Holy of Holies. It's like all these
that would be
things
weird.
like that. So, and so Mary gets to this place, and they're like praying for the perfect person. And Joseph's just lost his wife, and so he takes her in and takes Jesus in, but she takes her in pregnant. And so it's like this really strange story. I was reading it for the sake of finding out how do they say Joseph dies, but because man, that would that'd be
My problem is the text doesn't require you to pick one. But if you're Catholic, it kind of does, because there are extra beliefs that have been assigned that are dogmatic to the Catholic Church that require you to hold those views. This is why I do struggle with Catholicism, because there are a lot of things like this that historically don't lend themselves in that direction. It might be a possibility that Joseph had other wives and other stuff. It's not that big of a sticking point for me, but it's not a requirement.
Well, I hate to say it, but it is kind of difficult to get past it in the scripture. I'll just read you
It is
an
hard
ESV version.
historically.
It says, now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph before they came together, which implies eventually they do
come
because
together,
This is
yeah.
how you consummate a marriage. They would if they had never come together,
Especially in a Jewish family.
thinking, you are not married.
Right.
And therefore, he has none of the lineage of David. He has none, it would be a totally foreign concept. And
Until you come together, you're simply betrothed.
Right. It doesn't actually create, you have to consummate the marriage.
In fact, there's a huge rituals associated in Jewish culture with the consummation of marriages. It's a very important fact. That's why I don't think the history lends itself to that interpretation of the Catholic Church.
And that's Matthew. And then Luke, in fact, he goes on, he says, in those days there was a decree of Caesar. This is the first one with Quirinius, and all went to be registered, each to his own. And Joseph went up from Galilee, from the town of Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house of the lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger because there was no place for him in the inn. And so they do all of that conversation. And at the end of 8 days, he was called Jesus and named him the angel before he was conceived in the womb. And so there's this, maybe I'm reading the wrong passage here, but there is a clarity that this is supposed to be Joseph's, connection to that history. So I believe maybe I just messed it up. I'm going to go to Matthew again, because Matthew is the one who I think makes it clear that after the birth, that he kept her without, you didn't. Oh yeah. When the Joseph woke from his sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. So just in Matthew, there's a lot of implication that
They had other children.
they had at least intercourse. I mean,
They consummated
post
the marriage
Jesus
at some point.
Yes. And
The
so-
other thing is just that we talked about the Magnificat as part of the service, but Mary calls for her own Savior. She needs a Savior. And in the Magnificat, she says, that the God is my Savior. So the idea of waiting for Messiah is needing someone to redeem you, not just from the other things, but also seeing the redemption from sin. And now she's following Jesus around talking about redemption of sin. She submits to his authority as God. That seems to indicate that she needs to be saved from her sins. And if she's a sinner like all of us, the problem that you have if she's not is that then why do you need a Messiah? Why don't you just go to Mary? She was already prepared. And a Catholic would say, well, God prepared her. It's really only because of Jesus that she was able to do that, because she's like a temple. And I'll say, there's never a time where God couldn't use a fallible temple. If you go back and look at the actual history of the temple, people corrupted things happening in the temple all the time. Corrupt people work there. God took care of that, but eventually he forsook that and didn't come in until Christ came in and the presence of the temple was there. But the idea that God can't work with infallible people to bring about something glorifying to himself is to not understand the symbolic nature of the temple. So if she's like a temple that has to hold the perfect presence of the Lord, well, how's that different than anything else Israel did? It doesn't require her to be this perfect vessel for her to hold the Messiah. So it's just odd that a lot of this comes from other statements that are outside of the Bible. So it's like Jerome that kind of was one of those people that they kind of turned to, and others who would thought maybe that it was a cousins, because oftentimes you can say brothers for cousins is one of the arguments for customs, but that's not very likely, like with the verses that Greg has mentioned as well. So,
And maybe they were, in the same gang together. So we're a band of brothers. We're blood brothers.
They're homies?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're homies.
Yeah. So, all right. Was there anything else?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's just the one. I'm trying to go through all of these. How far back do you want to go? Let's see. So there's a couple here. There's one that's probably the biggest we should probably tackle first. This goes back to challenging beliefs. What if God defies our expectations? And we were talking a little bit about God having different. We sometimes put God in an expectation, and he defies our expectations because he's a being, and beings often do this. And so this person says, of course God does evil. So we talked about, God not being able to do evil. It says God is the Alpha and the Omega, the end and the beginning of everything. All that is arises from God. Who made Satan? They're implying God did. Who made hell? They're implying God did. So they're saying the same creator then made angels and heaven, and an omniscient, omnipotent being. Anything that doesn't meet approval can just be deleted from existence or prevented from being created at all. People love putting their own ideas of boundaries or limitations on God, but God has no limits. This is how they're defying God. And it says, that's why it's God. So they're saying God is the author of evil because he's the ultimate authority without limitation. So there you go.
All right. So we have some heresy being spewed here.
This is often, I see this often used in extreme cases for people who are usually somewhat conservative, but don't want to embrace Christianity because they say, well, my God would never have limitation. Almost like an extreme libertarian God that would have no boundaries and could do anything.
I do understand that thought in the sense that
it's very common.
I know that we understand that God has limits, and I'll go speak on that in just a second. But I do think the idea that if I'm thinking that God is omnipotent, he's all powerful, then I think that part of it is there is no limits to his power. There's nothing that is holding him back in any way. He can So I do.
That's correct.
I do get that aspect where it's like, so then, he can do this, and
But you're defining that the problem is that what people are doing is when we say he is all powerful, there's nothing to hold him back. Again, you're equivocating on the word powerful. The word powerful has to be defined. Because if you don't, you're going to, if he's all powerful, meaning he can do anything he wants, well, that would be true. He can do anything he wants, and he will never want to
And
do
he only
evil.
wants to do good.
Right, he only wants to do good. If he can do anything, what do we mean by anything? If we mean anything as in like legitimately every decision possible, well, that we would say, no, that's not what we mean by all powerful. Power is the ability to do what is in his purview to do. Now we're saying, oh, God has limitations. Yeah, his own character limits him. He says he doesn't lie. And people are like, oh, he lies. No.
So he can't be God if he can't lie, is what you're saying.
Right. And that's not the case. God doesn't lie. He doesn't actually lie to.
So then
He
they
doesn't
would
lie to
say,
his
well,
creation.
a person would often say, and I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah,
but
no, that's
the
fine.
person often in this situation would say, then that's a limitation on God. That would not be my definition of God.
Well, then you don't have the Bible, the God of the Bible. You've created your own God that philosophically is untenable, because creating an unlimited being is not creating anything. I mean, legitimately, if he can do all things, he can contradict himself. He says, this is the issue that you want. You have a pagan God at that point. The pagan gods will do evil, do good. They're capricious. They do whatever they want.
Because by their own definition, whatever they do is good.
Right. And that's not how it works. This is back to what they would call the Euthyphro dilemma. The Euthyphro dilemma, they are arguing for, is the debate of, if there's a God, there must be some law that limits God, right? And because if rape is evil,
Right.
then that rape evil because it's above God and it tells him what is evil. So he's reading some law book somewhere and he declares it. Or can God declare rape is good whenever he wants to? So it's capricious, whatever he wants. It doesn't have to be evil, but he made it evil. And so that's the problem that Euthyphro puts before Socrates. And the answer that these people are saying is the second one I said. That's true. God is just choosing arbitrarily what's good and evil. And well, guess what? When you do that, that makes God sound really petty in why he's judging people. But that is not the classic Christian nor Jewish vision of God. The classic Jewish and Christian vision of God is that he is the good. That's what the word God means. In fact, when we don't use the word in English, it's not some derivative of Yahweh or Elohim from the Old Testament. It's not even theos. We don't even call him the theon. Like that would be at least a closer representation from the Greek if we were going to translate. No, we use the old Saxon word gut, which means good. He is the good. He's the God. He's the God who is the good. And so that's first and foremost, we think of him as good in and of himself, and therefore never choosing to do evil. So what about Satan? Well, he created Satan, but he created Satan good. In fact, if you really look in the book of Ezekiel, you can read about the fall of the kind of the corruption of Satan. And it's not because, I believe it's Ezekiel 45, 46. I'm not doing well on my references today. But the fall of Satan is mimicked in this concept of the fall of the king of Tyre. And what happens is he is considered good. He was created as the one who was supposed to, there we go. Let's see if I can get it to show up. He was created to walk in Eden, to be his utmost and beautiful being, and until pride was found in him, and then he has to judge him. And here's the thing: evil was not invented by God. This is as if it's some kind of substance in and of itself. And this is the trick people I want people to get through, because there's debates over what is evil in the world of philosophy and theology. And there are those who talk about what we call a deprivation view. That evil is where God is not present, where God isn't found. And well, that breaks omnipresence. Like God is found everywhere. And so it's not that evil exists because God isn't present, as if it's a yin-yang kind of, oh, look, as God recedes, so evil exists more and more. No. I believe the biblical understanding of evil, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'll reiterate it again, is that we're talking about a twisting of something. When you talk about that which is iniquity, the literal Hebrew term, you can go to the Bible Project, do a great job at explaining this, is something that's twisted. When you're doing some unrighteousness, you're breaking a trust. The trust has to be there for unrighteousness to happen. That's why we call it when a transgression is done, you have to cross a already existing line.
Trespass.
So, right, trespass. And so the good already exists. You have to then break the good to produce evil. Evil exists when we take what is intended by God for good, like our attributes that we get from God, our creativity, our intelligence, our love, our justice, all these things, and then we take and twist them to selfish, personalized motivations. This is the evil of idolatry, that we take what God has made and twist it for ourselves. That is evil. Evil is the taking of the good, taking of all the beautiful attributes and things that God intends for one purpose, and we twist it to our own purposes. That's why sin is the missing of a mark. We're supposed to shoot this arrow at God's glory. That's what Paul says in Romans chapter 2. We've all fallen short of the glory of God. We're all supposed to represent him perfectly, but we all shoot it, and we don't just miss the target. Man, we're shooting wherever the heck we want with his attributes, with his limited, very limited. I mean, they're limited in us. I think that's what personality is getting at. And I get into this in my worldview class, which, by the way, if you're interested, it's open and it's available. Or they get into this conversation also. Alicia's going to do that in our Theology 1 class, which is open for anybody who's watching this. It starts on Wednesday. Jump in. I know this is coming out like a couple days before, but awesome opportunity. Look it up. There's some emails that have been sent out on it. But I want us to understand that evil is existence because good exists. If you erase the good, nothing exists. That's the opposite of good is not evil. The opposite of good is nothing. Evil dwells like a little wound, like a wound in skin, right? And man, you got to have the skin there to have the wound. And so
I heard it once described like sin is like rust on a chrome bumper, right? It is something acting against what is already there in good shapes, right? So if the bumper wasn't there, rust wouldn't exist.
Right. I mean, the rust on that bumper. Saying. Yes. Yeah. And it's very abstract, but I think this is where people are getting it wrong. They think that God can do whatever the heck he wants, and then he says it's good or bad. No, God does only what is actually truly good.
Yeah, you would define God as the greatest good, and it's the ultimate source of the standard of all that is good. So to me, like, there is no other standard. He is the good, right?
He's the answer to any grounding problem that you have.
So that's the difference between something being good and something that is the author of all that is good, because it's a part of who he is.
This is why, and this is why the ancients said when you're doing philosophy and you're coming to good moral judgments, you're actually discovering who God is.
Who God is, yeah.
You're touching God, is how they would say it, with your mind. And so when you know it's wrong to lie, you're touching God. He is the moral that makes a lie a lie.
Well, the whole idea of lying is to confuse you because you're capable of doing something that God's trying to withhold you from, that somehow you don't have the secret knowledge of being able to lie. So the idea is, to me, in order to serve a God who's the essence of all that is good, if you're going to do the opposite of him, by the sheer nature of doing that, you're going to do something that is not, well, quote unquote, good, right? So if you're in that camp, you join the evil camp, which means that you fall short of God's glory. And I think that's what's hard for people to say, because they think power is more important than goodness. And they're kind of need to go hand in hand. So the biblical Bible is God is all that is good and power, and those things are together. If you separate them apart and make them separate things, you can come up with many different evils trying to be like something greater than God. And the point is, there is nothing greater than God. So if you had a bunch of power and could do opposite of what is good, then you would cease to be what God is. You'd just be a powerful being doing evil, right? Because you're doing contrary to the standard of what is good. So what Christian is saying, I believe, is just that God is the standard by which all goodness is judged by. Anything other than that fall short, and we all fall short because of our own trying to be something other than what God wants us to be. And I think that's the frustration. Is I think there's this need, especially if you have a libertarian idea, that true freedom is the absence of any kind of standard other than your own. Well, then you become the standard of what's good. So something has to be the standard. So I'm much more easily accepting philosophically that God is both good and powerful, and those things go together. You can't separate them. and that I surrender to his will because he's the one that allows me to see goodness. And any type of independence from that would be something that would bring about harm. And so that's kind of the simple way I would look at it. Like, but I do understand the idea of just ideally thinking, well, wouldn't something who is powerful, all powerful, if it had limits, wouldn't it not be all powerful anymore? I was like, you're separating power from goodness. I would say the ultimate good and powerful thing to do needs to go correlate to each other. You can't separate those or you're going to create an evil.
No,
Can't a circle take any other shape it wants and still be a circle?
And who should limit it to anybody?
Well,
Who's to say,
Before we dive too far further, I want to remind and I've done some videos on the attributes of God. If you want to go and find those, they're on YouTube. But the Isaiah 45:7 is the one tripping point for a lot of people. He says, this is what Isaiah is writing. Yahweh is speaking. He says, I form light, I create darkness, I make peace, and I create evil. I am Yahweh, I do all these things. And right there, people go, see,
God's evil.
He creates evil. It says so in the Bible.
That's the
Lexham English Bible.
What Bible passage are we?
Isaiah 45:7. And so now here's
raw, right?
Yeah, this is the word raw. And so the difficulty about the word raw, and I'll read that in Isaiah 45:7, according to the NET, which is a NET, which is the New English Translation. It's a translation Bible. Its actual syntax note. It says this verse affirms that God is ultimately sovereign over his world, including mankind and nations. In accordance with the sovereign will, he can cause wars and cease and peace to predominate, for as he was about to do for his exiled people through Cyrus, or he can bring disaster and judgment on the nations as he was about to do to Babylon through Cyrus. And so they translate the word raw, which is just our word bad.
Bad, yeah.
He creates bad. Yeah, but not all bad is evil, first and foremost.
And this is something to understand. It's something being bad to you doesn't necessarily mean it is bad in total.
Right, and it can be bad
to the doctor,
to a nation, and it's not evil.
Right.
It might, in fact, go on with the doctor explanation.
The doctors, they say, when I'm at the doctor and he sticks a needle in my arm, that's bad to me. That's raw. That's the Bible would say. It's unfortunate event that occurred to me. But the doctor has a different set of rules that he's defining what good and bad is ultimately. And so if I go by just my raw and not the best raw, then I'm going to say that, yeah, this is evil. But if I understand what a doctor is supposed to do, then I will accept the fact that some of these things are required because of the fallenness of human nature and trying to repair things or to fix things or to control events to come out to the ultimate good. So that's kind of how I look at it, is like there are a lot of times we interpret something as disfavorable. The Bible calls that in the Old Testament raw. It's disfavorable to me. It's raw. So that's why sometimes you meant raw to me, and the Bible will say, but God turned it to tov, which means good. And it meant like the intent was bad, but God even changed the outcome. And so God's involved, I think, intimately and oftentimes bringing about things that look disfavorable to a group of people, ultimately because there's something else he's working on that he sees a higher form of reasoning, understanding.
For example,
I think everybody runs this way too, by the way.
For example, if God brings about a plague or brings about, say, a drought, his reason would be good. He's judging, or he knows that he needs to do these things to bring about these particular ends and goods. And
the theodicy is what this is called in the scripture.
People, they go, "Oh, this is bad.
Theology.
This is raw, and this is raw. But it's not morally evil,
right?"
And so, for God to take the life of a person,
which he does every person,
yes, is not morally evil, because that's the prerogative of God. It's wrong for us because that's not our prerogative.
Right.
That's why it's evil. It's overstepping our bounds. We're pretending to be God, unless he's given the authority to like a government, which then he's given away that authority. So,
well, this goes back to our original argument. Oftentimes people get in these arguments because they don't like the idea of a God having a different set of agendas from their own. Because we originally talked about God causing you to feel discomfort because he doesn't meet your expectations of what a God does. And I'm saying, yeah, a God would do that. Like, if you have these concepts that I need a God to be free and of any limitations and do whatever he wants to do, I'm like, well, that's some people believe that God exists. And the way they care about life looks a lot different than the way that people have traditionally carried out Christianity. So you might have an expectation, but God might not meet your expectation. He might have his own definitions, and because he is the true definition of what is good. So when we say God, we don't just mean like a being. We're actually making philosophical statements about what that means as a Christian, different than maybe some people in the world. Oh, I believe in God. This is why. Oh, what God do you believe?
Now, I'm going to take it one even step further where this is going to sound controversial to some people because they don't understand, I think, some of this theology is that hell is good.
They don't see it as a place that people would choose either.
Yeah, hell is not. Hell is the place people. I agree with you. The people choose to go to. It's not a place that God's threatening you with. He's warning you. There's a difference between a threat and a warning.
It's like a cop, right? Or a good cop.
But it's more like
I'm warning you.
Don't drive up this off ramp sign or this on ramp or this. Yeah,
don't go backwards on the freeway.
Way.
That would be bad.
That's very
raw.
The freeway
and everyone else.
Or out of a parking lot where it'll puncture your tires.
And so what people don't understand is that prisons are good places in the sense that the idea behind a prison to keep very evil people who harm people away to help hopefully rehab them and help them, whatever the purpose of the prison is. There have been different kinds.
Or just protect society.
The prison is good. The prison isn't the problem. What makes the prison a problem are the people inside the prison. So the same thing is true of hell.
If everybody got together and decided to make prison a positive experience, I guess they could theoretically.
Right. It could, but prison...
Not likely, but...
And this is the problem with hell. Hell is a horrible place, not because of the location, not because it is literally because the people dwelling there, the beings dwelling there, make it even worse. And that, honestly, it's fascinating. Do a study, if you're interested in this stuff, do a study on how God does judgment. And what you'll discover is God oftentimes just allows the evil you intended for someone else to fall on you.
Yeah.
I think that's a great study of what hell is really like. It's a whole bunch of people running around trying to get their own, only to have what they're trying to do fall on them because everybody else is doing it to them back. And it's the worst of our human beings selves in a world where God has said, my judgment is you left in the fallen state. I believe we will deteriorate to be less and less human, less and less, will be more and more animalistic, and it just becomes worse and worse.
I just like C.S. Lewis's stuff on the Great Divorce, and even in weird beliefs that aren't even Christian, like Jean Paul Sartre, he believed that, in the end of his play, No Exit, hell was people. It was just the combination of these three people made hellish state for the three people in this room.
Because they couldn't get along.
They couldn't get along, and they just cried. They're the kind of people that they were handpicked to make each other feel like they were in hell by being together. That'd
be a fun play to do.
I would love to do that. I have looked into it just recently. That's why I watched a production of it. But the idea behind it is more Christian than some of the medieval concepts that we have in hell. Because in the play, he goes, "Are you the torturer?" And the bellhop, he goes, "No, what?" And no, I'm just here. And the idea is that we have this medieval concept that I don't think is biblical, especially not in the old or the new, that hell is like these pitchforks and these people on sticks and
the torment chambers
of
medieval
hell,
warlords of the ancient
hell
world.
Is a place that's, I don't want God. I don't want to be ruled by God. I don't want God telling me anything to do. The closest proximity you're going to get to that is hell. It's
Which
a place
is probably the most libertarian
That's what I'm saying.
location
It's the most
in the
libertarian
world.
place you can go. I don't want any control by the benevolent good God. Well, what does that look like? It looks like hell. And I think you can capture some of this on earth. There are just moments I've found in my life that are hellish. In other words, you're just like, I can't resolve this. And it's just frustrating. And it's like a bad relationship, or you didn't get something you wanted and you're never going to get it. Or like that idea of it keeps rolling around in your head and you're just so frustrating. That's the concept of hell. The idea is that you're experiencing a little bit of hell in hopes that you realize this isn't a permanent condition. Because we have mercy, but there it is, the culmination of the choice that you've made. Right now, you have freedom from God to have good things happen to you, even when you make bad decisions, in hopes that you'll see what heaven's like, which is when everybody gets along, they do all the good together, and there are these moments where you're like, wow, this feels really good. This feels a little bit like heaven, and those are just glimpses, I think, of eternal states.
And we get glimpses of it here.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you feel it
when
here.
Technology doesn't work right, and you're just like, I'm in hell.
Guess what?
And then somebody comes in your office and fixes it, and you're like, heaven again.
Right, because when things don't work as they are intended, when they're not in their appropriate limits, the shalom is not about a limitless existence. Shalom is everything in its proper place, right? Proper limits and places. And just to go back to this, that means God is actually a God of peace. And what's important about that word peace is in the Greek, you can translate it both as order or as peace. And for someone to say that God can do anything and do evil without he has no limits is to argue then that God is not a God of order. He's a God of chaos.
Which would be a different God.
That is not the God of the Bible, and it is not. You're not working off the same philosophical assumptions that Christians work off of. And in fact, you can't even use the word God if he has no limitations, because then using the word God is a limitation.
As soon as you define God, he has limitations. No matter anything you define has limitations. It has to. There's things that is not.
Even by calling him the unlimited power, is
that he's not the limited God.
He's now limited by your concept of unlimited power. So,
but I do like peace because it's the same in Hebrew. The idea of asking someone to this day, "How are you doing?" in Hebrew is "Ma shlomcha," which means "How's your peace?" Mm-hmm. How is the chaos versus the order in your life going right now?
And this may be helpful for some of you. It's your new year, and let me apply this crazy talk for a second. One is that if you seek for the right order in your life, you will find more peace. One of the things we do is we end up deciding to bring hell into our lives.
Yeah.
By not making decisions.
Not even knowing
how.
By
not being willing to suffer for the good to bring about the good, because you live automatically in a fallen state. You have to suffer forward to bring about the better in your life. And if you're stuck in something, it takes hard work and suffering to get out of it, because the brokenness is already there. Now, Jesus has set our hearts right so that we can work through that. Sanctification is painful. It's not easy. It's why it's less tried. It's easier just to go, I'm saved by Jesus. Now I'm transformed. Give me the miracle. Yes, but no.
Sanctification begins.
It's like being and I use this illustration in sermons. It's just really critical. It's the difference between freedom from and freedom to. The freedom from is what people like who want to say God is limitless, so we're free from everything. Well, no. Now you got nothing. The concept in the Bible is, yes, there are some things you should be free from. You should be free from evil. Be free from evil, but be free. How do you become free from evil? By being free to do the good. What that means is the difference between a monkey playing a piano and a human pianist who has worked at millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years in a conservatory. A true professional pianist will be able to play anything. They're free on that keyboard. That keyboard is a thing that enables them to grow and do music and produce things. And look, being somebody who's an amateur pianist, there are things I wish my hands would do because I hear the song and I'm not as free as that person. Now, I'm not going to run around and go, I'm freer than the professional pianist because I can do whatever I want. Blah, 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 blah.
There are people in art that have made that argument.
John Cage. And it makes ugly music.
It does.
It's not even music.
Because the idea, I think, of art is to bring some orderness to something. And so the more ordered you are as a person, which we call discipline, towards the good, the freer you are, which sounds counterintuitive. It feels like if I have no limitations, I'm going to produce a good. That's not true. Like most people who have no limitations do not produce good things. We call them sequels to movies. The first one was good because they had less money to make it and they had all the creativity. The second one, they get a limited budget and they make a terrible movie. Why? Because sometimes the constraint and the discipline that shows brings about better art, or it brings about better disciplines. It brings about more concern or focus. And so you're never going to get away from that struggle of removing the chaos to bring in the order.
I mean, look at creation. This brings me right back to the calling that God gave the humanity to subdue the earth. We think of this as like, destroy it. No, and I think sometimes scholars forget that when a creation narrative was being written in the ancient Near East, they were talking about the gods bringing order to the chaos of the world. And in this sense, God is the ordering factor. He brings it all. And then he tells humanity, go out and order it. By subduing it, bring it under rule over the fish of the bird. And if the universe is filled with at least it's filled on this planet, we wouldn't have all of the things put together so precisely, and we didn't have systems, solar systems, body systems. Like systems are derived from order. This is not derived from chaos, and it's just this is how much why I kind of got me all stirred up on it. I want to talk about it. It's because this is a fundamental issue. What did Jesus die for then? if God is not good and there is a true that evil exists because it is opposed to his character and who he is, then what did Jesus do? What did he die for? Some arbitrary choice? Like, no, you don't have the Christian God. If you think God is limitless in this manner, you are actually going to destroy the gospel. This is a critical issue. Sorry. Okay. Off my theology high horse.
You can tell he hasn't preached a full sermon
Yeah,
in
it's
2
been a while.
weeks, huh? He's,
There's many more comments. There's some that are a little lighter. Someone, this one just says Christmas is not according to the Bible.
That's lighter? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So, and this comes up. We talked about this before the podcast. It's just that there are people that do believe that Christmas is not in the Bible, so we shouldn't celebrate it, or that it's pagan in some way.
Well, I mean,
now, what do you think that means? Because when I hear that,
I don't know.
You know,
It's very
my
vague.
mind first goes to, because I always try to give people credit for their comments.
You're trying to steel man their arguments, trying to give them the best results from their
Yeah, you know, and just kind of like, okay, you know, I mean,
What are you
to say
trying to
that
say?
Christmas is not biblical, when they say that, I go to the idea that I think we're pretty aware that Christmas, you know, the birth of Christ didn't happen on December 25th.
Yeah.
So when people say that, that's where my mind goes to. They're telling me that no, Christmas isn't the birth of Christ. He was born in June or July, and you know, but if they're saying that, you know, Christmas isn't biblical in the sense that Jesus was born, he was the Messiah, and we're simply celebrating him, you know, arriving in the flesh on this earth to redeem us, you know, and the same way we celebrate Easter, you know, we celebrate the fact that he rose again. He conquered death. He proved that everything he said was true. And, you know, so, I mean, Greg, you said, you know, we're not celebrating a day, we're celebrating a person.
oh, that
Right?
one, yeah, Steve
Was
said
that you that said that?
Yeah, because I think it gets overlooked because we celebrate on the same day all the time. We think of there needs to be some historic reason for the day, and then we argue over, is it the 25th, or is that some ancient legend that meant that you were born and died or crucified on the same day? None of that matters. You pick a day to celebrate a person and what they did, and that's kind of how I look at Christmas, because none of the events, even in the Christmas event in the Bible, happen on the same day.
Right.
So you have the wise men coming on a different day, and you have the shepherds on a different day, and the prophecy of who Jesus was at the temple and who he's going to be, that's on a different day. We're celebrating the arrival of this incarnate Christ that everybody's recognizing, and then we go, hey, that sounds like something that would be good to celebrate. Like, the Bible doesn't say, hey, go out and celebrate this.
I would
It's
say-
just like,
I would
is it
say-
a good thing to celebrate? It depends. Everybody celebrates things. They have their own internalized reasons. So I think you do need to ask yourself, what am I celebrating on Christmas?
And I think if we celebrated the way you were talking about, you know, celebrating the birth and celebrating the day that the, you know, shepherds made it and the day that the
Celebrating
wise
the
men
person,
made it,
the arrival
I
of
would
the
say
person.
that would be like birthdays at my house, and we joke around that everybody gets 12 days of birthdays because my wife's like, okay, their birthday fell on a Wednesday. We need to take them out for dinner and celebrate their birthday and give them a little
get a
treat.
birthday month.
And then we're all going to get together as a family on this weekend. It's not really their birthday. We're
Yeah.
going to celebrate their birthday and give gifts, and then their friends are coming over, so we're going to do another birthday party. And it's just like,
Nope.
hey, whoa.
Whoa, you get a day. If you don't show up, you don't
Yeah.
get celebrated. It's not about
So I
you.
like-
It's about the day.
Right. This is the funny thing, right? So people get all. It's one of the funny things is this is how we celebrate most things. For example,
Right.
what is Independence Day in the United States? It's
4th of
July
July.
4th. 4th of July. You know, does England have a 4th of July?
No.
Yes, it does. It
Yes,
doesn't
it
have an
does.
Independence Day.
It just doesn't have Independence Day.
Boom, chakalaka, brother.
But
Greg and his terrible jokes, but that was pretty good.
no, the point that though is, when was the Declaration of Independence signed? August 2nd, 1776. Like way later, almost a month later, and it actually wasn't all signed on that day. It was signed over the
Everybody
whole time.
Signed a bunch of different signatures.
Yeah, so it's this. There wasn't all in the same room and all these things. It was, people are like, oh, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration on July 4th, but they signed it later, and so it's this. Yeah, guess what? We celebrate on one day because it's the
event.
memorialization of the full event of the birth of our nation. Christmas is the memorialization of the full event of the incarnation of God on earth, just like Easter is the memorial event of his resurrection. But every Sunday is, and so is And it's also our new life. I mean, there's a church calendar out there that celebrates these specific dates, from Good Friday, Easter, and even
like a liturgy.
Yeah, even Pentecost is one of the days celebrated, because these are important dates to Christians of celebration of what God has done on earth. And that we get into these nitpicky fights about, it's not in the Bible. Yeah, you know what? I agree.
It's not
The personalized celebration day is not.
It's not declaring you need to do it on the 25th of December, which is not a calendar they would have been looking at anyway. So it's just kind of weird that we look at it that way. But I do think, like we've talked about this, I think it's a good question to ask. What are you celebrating on Christmas? What do you celebrate? Because I think that will determine what you prioritize at the particular time. I also think, like you said, I don't think people just celebrate on the day. I think we celebrate from like right as soon as Thanksgiving's over,
and it's on.
Even sometimes you skip some holiday, and you skip over Thanksgiving to get to Christmas. 4 weeks
of sermons on Christmas, right? It's not just one. It's 4 weeks on Jesus being born, and who's Mary, and who's Joseph, and what happened, and how.
We struggle with this as a church, because we're trying to celebrate Christ, and what's the best day to do that? Is it the day? What if Christmas falls, like the Easter falls on a day like it's not close to this particular? So like this time it was in the middle of the week, right? That throws everything off for a church. Like
in the middle of the week next week.
Yeah, there are people that they've done that also, that have just been like, well, where do you celebrate it? It's like the idea is that you try to make it meaningful to celebrate. Who you're celebrating is more important, and prioritizing how you're going to do that. I do think a part of Christmas is, for us traditionally, celebrating the love of family as well. But again, that shouldn't take priority over, why do we have a family, or why do you have gifts?
But you were talking about, when do we celebrate Christmas? And one of the
Christmas
things
Eve,
I think
Christmas Day
is, just coming to work today, right? It's 357 days left till Christmas, and people already have their Christmas lights up. This is ridiculous.
Some of them I'm taking it down. Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Some of them are going to leave them up no matter what.
In fact, I like it. In fact, the thing that I love about Christmas is that I do believe that there are these moments to help focus us on the Lord. Like people go, "Oh, your Christmas trees." Like I do I have fun, and I write an entire little poem and stuff about how the Christmas tree can tell the gospel. What other season? Pagans didn't run around giving gifts. That's a very Christian concept of giving and generosity, and these ideas of lights on the tree, and these concepts are not like people want to paganize and look back and like, it comes from this, comes from that. But we're very good and very adroit at going, a symbol is a symbol. We can make a symbol. We can take symbols and take those symbols and use those symbols. And it started with the idea of the cross. If you stop and think about it, the cross was never
It's like a cow.
I was like, wow, we got some interesting things going on.
It sounded like Chewbacca.
Yeah, that wasn't my phone. That
wasn't your phone?
It was the headset.
The symbol. Do you guys know what the original? We'll start back. Do you know what the original symbol of Christianity was?
The original symbol was a fish.
The fish.
The fish. Yeah.
The fish. Because you could use it, and it was
half and half.
It stood for something, and Jesus Christ,
the fishers of men,
Lord crucified, our Savior. It was an acronym, and so the cross. It took hundreds of years. It took about 100 years until the cross was really minimized in the psyche of the Roman to be used as a symbol of salvation. Otherwise, it was too overwhelming of a brutalized symbol. But think what Christianity did. We took the most brutal torture symbol that ever existed. It was a picture of Roman power, of Persian power, of don't you cross us, we'll put you on a cross. We have you under our foot, you rebels. And we turned it into, we won. The cross is a symbol of eternal life for all people. The Roman, those who killed him on a cross. Why wasn't it a stone, a little circle with a stone on it, right? Why wasn't it that? No, the cross was a massive shift of focus. And we've taken symbols since the early generation of Jesus. He did it. He takes the communion table, which is a Jewish Passover meal, and he re-symbolizes it. We aren't doing anything Jesus didn't already do. So even if Christmas was a pagan celebration of whatever, and we flipped it into a Christian celebration, guess what? It's a Christian celebration because Jesus took symbols and changed them. We will too. That's what we do. And so that's my basic theological argument for why it's okay.
Well, that was the Christmas one. There's many more. We can stop there or keep
We'll
going.
pause there and
All right.
just kind of relax with our last 15 minutes here and just reminisce about our last
We're gonna
year of
year in review. Is that what
podcasts.
we're doing?
I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm
Take us away.
going to read the statement first, so we don't step on it by saying ours and it being the same or anything. But I sent out an email to everybody that is on our Rabbit Trail podcast mailing list and that have sent us mail or signed up. And so one of the things we were asking is just, hey, we want to do a year-end review and give us your comments or your feedback on what was your favorite sermon series or what was your favorite podcast series. How has it helped you in your faith and whatnot. I only got one response, although it did go out late. It went out Tuesday afternoon, and here we are on Thursday. And we had a holiday in between, but we got one, and it says, "Hey, pastors, I think the sermon series that I took to heart the most this year was the Offended series. I try to recall to my mind not to be offended when I would otherwise have acted on an offense. I enjoy the podcast as it allows me to know you all better. I enjoy the discussions and freedom you each have to express your understanding of scriptural topics." That was from Sue, but so we just want to thank you for that and the feedback and the nice comments. And
Thank you all.
yeah, you enjoy the podcast because it allows you to get us all to know us all better, and just don't get it to know us too well. That may change your opinion of us, or at least me. So again, I'm going to ask you guys, if you're thinking back to the last year, what was your favorite sermon series? What was your favorite memory from the podcast?
So here, I'll give you guys kind of the list, right? We did the Offended series. That was last January. And then we went into Contrast, which was a series from basically 1 Peter, where we're living in contrast to the world. And then Assumption's Gone Viral. That was our kind of Easter one where we're talking about being anti-science, or it's all about hate and Jesus versus politics, some of that stuff. We talked about Vital Family and influences in the Vital Family and experiences of that, and how you guide your children, that kind of stuff. We talked about Facing the Storm, and we started into the end of 1 Peter and kind of closed it off. And then we started Mark with Follow Who, and we really kind of described who Jesus was and walked with him through the beginning of Mark. Then we did our friendship series called Friends.irl, and Magnetic was our next one in Jesus either pulls you in or pushes you away. I really enjoyed that series a lot. And then finally we landed with Reviving Christmas. So that's kind of really the whole series layout that we ran through.
What personally for you, not necessarily which one did you like best, you can answer that in a minute, but which one do you feel like you got the most feedback on?
Oh, definitely the Friends.irl.
Really?
I got Offended and Friends. Those two, I've never had such huge feedback in our church history for two series in a year. It was just like people talk about Offended, and then we did the Friends.irl, and I still hear about it. I
Really?
still am hearing from people who are like, I took that in, I'm still building friendships. And it's just, I felt like those two really hit kind of where our culture is really struggling right now.
Now, where a lot of the feedback you're getting was it, like you just mentioned, I've been making new relationships, new friendships. So was it more like that really helped me to build relationships, or was it more of helping to identify what a toxic relationship looks like,
Some of
and
that from
boundaries
Offended,
and
yeah.
getting out of unhealthy relationships?
Yeah, I think that.
Never been a time.
Yeah, I think that I've had a lot of people speak to us about, like, in the Offended series, like really drawing boundaries. I've actually walked with some families who have been having to do that within their family, and some other people, and teaching more about boundaries than ever. Like, okay, you draw a boundary, but you got to have a gate. Gates open the doors for people to come through the boundaries. It's been helpful for me because I've had to learn to draw better boundaries and things. And the friendship one, the Friends.irl, was just powerful because it kind of helped for a lot of people kind of figure their way they think through friendship. Like everybody had like, I got friends or they're not my friends. And you're like, no, there's this whole kind of stream of connections that you can have with people. And not everybody's your best friend, and not everybody's just a friend. They're acquaintances. Then there's the really deep friends. There's all these kinds of like levels of friendship. And I think that really helped a lot of people out, especially older people who are like, I've lost a lot of friends. I really need to be building my friends. So,
I mean, one thing I liked about the Offended series, and that's probably the series I hear most of people go on.
You are in the
really
counseling
like that.
section, so
But also just that idea that, like I know when you started it and we were talking about the series before you launched it, it was the idea that we live in a society that almost is hungry to be offended. They're like looking for everything to offend, and everything does offend. And part of the idea of, number one, it's okay to be offended. I mean, sometimes people offend you and they're not doing it intentionally or maliciously, so let some offenses just roll off your back, and not worry about them, and not make a bigger deal about them than there needs to be. But also, it's not always bad to step into offending somebody for the right reasons, and you can be healthy and offend somebody, and so I do think that it helped people more realize I don't have to be offended and make a mountain out of a molehill every time I'm offended, and it's kind of helped them let go. So
it's hard for me because I don't do it by series in my head. I'm typically looking at the book that you're in. So, and we did a couple of Marks and a couple of Peters that are series that are focused on a particular topic, which I like. But I think in Mark chapter 4, I don't know how many series were in Mark chapter 4, but that section of the parables and the section of the storm
series,
that's the one that I like the most. I like the offended one because anytime someone says, I'm offended, everybody's offended. We talk about that. I can talk about that all day long. That topic is more interesting, but the passage that I got the most out of was just making these parables relevant to the parable of the sower, because there's so much debate on a lot of this stuff as far as like, what do these parables mean, and why is Jesus pushing some people away and pulling someone in out of curiosity, and just knowing that that's kind of how God does it all the time, right? He makes some people curious, or he'll put something out there and it makes them choose to make a decision. It's almost like he puts it out there and they have to contend with it. And so, and then just the idea of any kind of close to East, it was close to Halloween that we did the Jesus calming the storm. And I'm just finding the more I read the Bible, the scariest moments of the Bible have nothing to do with the devil. They have more to do with God. And I find God being more scary than the devil to me. That should make sense. If he's the most powerful being, everything else submits to him in the sense. And so I enjoyed that, where the demon is the demons are there and he's on foreign territory and they're begging, please let us go into the pigs, and just everybody's afraid. We have the assumption that God does a good thing. Everybody's going to acknowledge that good thing. They're like, yeah, that was great, that demon thing that you did. Can you go now? I don't want you anywhere near my lifestyle. And I find that to be incredibly relevant today, which is like people are just like, you think God's going to do something great, and everybody's going to be like, oh, God, Jesus, he's the greatest. And no, if you don't like God, you're not going to like him messing up your whatever system of life that you feel comfortable with. And God's always making people feel uncomfortable just by being him. You have to respond to him. So we did that series is the one that struck me. Part of that is because you preached after, so I kind of had to follow a lot more details because I preached in the middle of 2 of that series.
Oh, yeah.
And I just love the parables, and I'm always curious as to how they all link together. We all read them separate as children, but when you read them together, there's like a whole other story there about like, how does the word of God hit somebody in their heart? What is our responsibility to it, and how do we participate? Because sometimes it's God and sometimes it's us. We're sowing, but we're not responsible for the outcome. It's like, oh, okay, that alleviates a lot of pressure. That if I just be a Christian and act like God and let people get offended or not get offended, then that's fine. I don't have to worry about them convincing them. Like if I just give them the best, giving the best argument should be about love, not about like, I'm going to make them believe because my arguments are so awesome. That oftentimes, even when Jesus preached, he purposely let people walk away because they were mad. And I find that to be a method that we can all use. And you're not seeking that out, but it happens. And it's a part of what you do when you sow properly. So I don't know. I liked it.
I think personally for me that the sermon series that stood out the most, and again, when I was talking about the Offended series and you were like, because you do a lot of the counseling but from other people being helped by it. I think probably the Facing the Storm one is kind of the same thing for me, as in just dealing with people that are going through crisis and going through pain and loss, and so just facing those storms in your life, and part of it is, the sermon titles were like, don't stop, don't give up on the good, so even when you're suffering, just keep pushing forward, for the good, signs of suffering, and I liked the way that you wrapped it up, just the whole idea that when we are in a crisis, when we are suffering, don't focus as much on the suffering and the pain as much as what God can do through it, and again, we are going to go through bad things. We're going to go through raw,
Yeah, exactly.
And so part of that is God promised us He's, not necessarily, we're not going to experience it or we're not going to be surrounded with consequences of it, but He will bring good out of that for those who love Him.
Yeah, I'll be one of the most seminal sermons. There were a bunch this year that I think normally I can forget my sermons and I'm like, and then there are some of them that just kind of keep hitting me. And one of them was actually the one from 1 Peter where we were talking about life in contrast and political contrast. And he's talking about living under the empire. I have come back to this concept over and over again, which is we need to live as freed people by God. Regardless of what a government tells you. I mean, this is especially helpful for me when you're living in California and everybody's like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, and blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, I'm just going to live free. As long as I know I'm living free before the Lord, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm not sinning against anyone. The laws of the land, I'll obey them as they are right and good, but I'm not going to worry myself about all these things that are going on, this and that. It's like, no, you know what? I'm free. I don't have to live like that is a matter of consequence to me. And it's that because what can they do to me? They can threaten me, but how far they can never take my Lord away. They take my life away, but I get it back. It's like there's just this kind of reality of you live in the freest position. Go ahead.
I just think it's funny. It reminds me, I was looking up D&D shirts and I was talking about being chaotic good. So defined chaotic good as an adjective, to be free-spirited that performs acts of kindness regardless of what the stupid law has to say about it. And then the definition too is can and will stab you for a greater good. So just to me, it's just that idea of chaotic good is like, I don't hold to your authority. I have a higher authority by which I govern what is good. And if you don't like it, then I guess we fight. I don't know.
No. The last one,
singing it out, but it'll happen.
Yeah, the last series I got lots of response over, but it wasn't because of the content. It was because of how we did the worship. This last Christmas series. People really enjoyed worship intermixed into the message. Kind of had more of an emotional movement to it, but I'm not so sure the content came out clear. But because it was a bit more of an emotive, experiential kind of series than it was, I would say. Like, oh man, I just really learned some stuff about, I was trying to provoke
worship.
Yeah.
No, really provoke revival, like surrender, wonder, and then especially the surrender one has really hit me. But I've been studying it for 6 months, so it was like expectation. All these things birth from surrender, and yeah, I think it does. It brings a sense of revival because I don't have to control God. I don't have to deal with God's homework. Like, woo, let's go live. So, kind of my result of my year has really come down to a conclusion, and I wrote it down in my journal, and I've been using it, and that is, pray, decide, try, and trust. That's the whole synopsis to me of life at this point. It's like I need to pray about the things and give God control of whatever I have. Make a decision. Don't wait on it. Try what I've decided to do, and God will handle the outcomes. So I trust Him, and that's it. Yeah. If I'm not, and that's it. If whatever I prayed about, tried, decided, I'm going to trust Him. That's kind of my synopsis of my year of study. just kind of brought me to.
Yeah, it was a different, kind of unsettling series in the sense that the movements in the service, right? You know, I mean, unsettling, where you didn't really get to settle in and take in a full message, right? It was kind of like a bite size here, go into a worship song. And then, so for me, like trying to take notes, you know, I didn't feel like I got a lot in my notes, you know, from the service. And part of me too is I was looking going, poor worship band, they don't get to go eat. You know, they get here at 6 o'clock in the morning, they leave at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
They were champs. They did a great job.
Yeah.
In fact, we had more time in between services than ever. So
Yeah?
yeah, because it was only an hour service.
The songs are timed.
Every one of those services were
Yeah,
only an
every
hour?
one.
Oh, wow.
We nailed it within an hour and 3 minutes.
Okay.
Like the children's
Then I don't feel
ministry-
sorry for the worship team.
The children's ministry is begging us to keep this format up because they're just
Yeah.
like, we want all this time is awesome. Sorry.
Wow.
But yep, that was the year in review. Kind of any other pieces you want to throw on there, Stephen? Thoughts finally?
No,
Because
I can't think of anything that to strike out. I'm just trying to think of the podcasts that I enjoyed the most, but that those are moments that I don't always remember unless they come up on a clip and my face is on TV, and that's really weird.
Well, one thing I want to encourage people about too is this. You know, number one, we did a couple of sermons. We did contrast. You know, and one of the topics on there was contrast in politics. So just, you know, the contrastingness of our society and everything, contrast in politics. And right after that, we did assumptions, gone viral, what people assume Christians and the church are all about. And we hit conservative politics. And then we did a political podcast. And I've had opportunity on all three occasions when somebody is kind of attacking Christians and, you know, Christian nationalism is bad. Greg talked about it in this sermon, and here's the timestamp. And so it's been a great opportunity when people are asking me questions, and I'm like, well, this is our position. Check it out, you know. And then if you
There's
want to
several
discuss
positions.
it, you know, if you want to discuss it, then we can discuss it. And so I feel like the sermon series on YouTube are a good tool to do that, because you can make them not have to listen to the whole, you know, 45-minute sermon, and you can give them just a short window. They're more likely to listen to that, and the podcast the same way. And I will say, I just want to encourage you, if you enjoy the podcast, if you're getting stuff out of it, use it as an evangelistic tool too, and just, you know, tell people about it, share things with it. If you hear something that you feel like somebody needs to hear this, feel free, you know, to turn them on to it. And if you use timestamps, it's easier for them to just get to the serious stuff and not have to sit through Brent's terrible jokes and
Fast forward or
and our 15 minutes of just absolute blundering through as we, because part of that is we get here and we haven't seen each other most of the week, and then we just kind of talk a lot.
but yeah, go ahead.
Well, just for me, as part of enjoying the year, and the podcast also ties into the drama, and it's really just, we need to start making culture instead of critiquing it. Mm-hmm. And part of the podcast is to create a culture with people. We have events to hang out. And so the event that we hung out with people, and there's 40, 50 of you that came out, I enjoyed that a lot because it doesn't feel like you're alone in your questions, or at least your curiosity or intellect. I like to pursue intellectual pursuits. I want people to be more in tune with their faith and their thinking and their feeling. I want both of those things to go along together. Same thing for why do I do all these things like the podcast, and how does that have to do with drama? And I'm like, I don't want to just say what's bad art. I also want to do what I think is good art. And so there's been some times where the podcast has produced thoughts for people and provoked culture and people thinking and changing. And that's what I thought the play did as well for me, is just hearing like, okay, it tied in with the sermon for someone about there is value in the human life because you're created in the image of God, and God wants to do something with that, and you're not put in a place and time by yourself. So that hit well with the messages that we've been having and the podcast, that, you know, you don't think things matter as much, but I do like to see us as a church not just be like pushing back against California, but creating what you think California should be. make a place where that looks like. If you don't like what the city is doing, or you don't like what the school is doing, invest in our school. We have a school. Like, if you don't like this, then do the good thing that you want to see happen and see what God can do with that. So that's why I like the podcast. Why it's fun for me is it feels like a culture making moment and not just a conversation, because we have these conversations all the time, whether we're on the podcast or not.
And I just want to also continue to encourage you guys to, like Brent said, and Stephen's indicating, is that you can create culture by being a part of what we're doing, by asking your questions from your quiet times. I'm going to talk about this on Sunday, and just, by spreading out this opportunity for people to really use us as a resource. We don't have to just do what we want to do. If we're overloaded with your questions, we would much rather follow where you guys are going and unload and answer some of those questions that you have curiosity from the messages or from just your own time in the Word. Yeah. And so feel free to begin to
be curious,
bring those in, be curious and ask and share it with those people who are asking questions in your life. I think one of the things I heard, and this is a depressing stat, 1% of churches in the United States believe that they are doing well evangelistically. 1%. It was 7% last year. It's dropped to 1%. And guys, that means we're not talking to our friends because we're afraid probably we don't have answers or whatever. We're right here. We want to answer your friends' questions. We will take more time if necessary to do that. Not that that's what you want, but we want to be a resource for you. Please, please, please share this podcast. Enable us to help your friends and you follow that truth wherever it leads, because it leads to some pretty incredible places. 2025 is going to be an awesome year. We're going to have some classes. We've got some discipleship cards coming out. We've got our podcast that's rolling. Guys, there's no reason Olive Branch can't be a provisional place for you in all of your ministry and all of your evangelism. Ask any question. Let's do this. We're just glad you're with us on the ride. It's going to be exciting from here. And if you want to ask those questions or point people, use that email. It's rabbittrail@obcc.church. rabbittrail@obcc.church. We can't wait to hear from you. Well, God bless you and have a great rest of your week.
Boom, chakalaka.
Bye.